from analog.
Hi, Jim. You have a great signal up here. You're 5.9 plus.
You're digital.
We are everywhere you want to be. This is the CQ Blind Hams Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the May 2023 edition of the CQ Blind Hams Tech Zoom. I guess you can think of it as the interactive version of the CQ Blind Hams podcast. You can find out more about Blind Hams and all of our activities and how to follow the podcasts and our network and nets and all that good stuff at www.blindhams.com. Also, that is where the link to this Zoom room exists. So those who are not here listening but are catching it at home later and you want to know how to get in on these meetings, that's how you find us on the second Thursday of every month, 8 p.m. Eastern. You go to blindhams.com, find that link, and you can join us too. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the fellow crew members here. Joel, W0CAS, how are things?
Everything's going great, Julian. Looking forward to the Long Island CW Club, and we appreciate the guys coming and spending their time with us to try to help encourage CW operations. I'd like to make one little thing that I normally do not do. We also make this podcast into a YouTube podcast, so anybody listens to this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. We're over 400 subscribers now. It doesn't sound like a lot in YouTube terms, but if we ever hit 1,000 subscribers, then YouTube will let us monetize. And what we're going to do then is we're going to take the money that YouTube gives us and buy radios for new blind hams that can't afford a radio. So that's going to be a little revenue, but we're only going to use the money to buy new blind hams radios once they're licensed. And that's usually the only time I'll ever ask anybody to do anything. So if you're on YouTube, subscribe to CQ Blind Hams. Thanks, Julian.
Oh, no problem. And I think that sounds like an awesome idea. So again, anybody listening later, please find us on YouTube and please just take a moment to hit that subscribe button. You will be helping us to do a very good thing for blind hams. So, Robert, NC5R, how are things in Texas?
Everything's good, Julian. Good evening, everybody. Glad you're all here, and I'm looking forward to this podcast as well. Back to you, Julian.
Thanks, Robert. And Steve, WB2KTV. I think you've kind of been to hell and back recently. How are you feeling today?
Oh, doing real well, Julian. Thanks for asking. Been home a couple of days. Hospital was very restorative. They filled me up with a lot of Ringer's lactate and a lot of TLC. And I seem to be back in the black now. I've been a ham since 69, and now I am 69, so there's that. When I started, I got a Heath HW16 for Christmas, which was a 75-watt novice rig, which I used for 3 years until my cousin, the late WB2KYN, he got his license. And when he went off to college, I inherited his HW100. So I got a little bit more power, and I got a microphone, but you know what? I never touched it. I love CW, and I can't wait to hear what Long Island CW Club has for us.
Awesome. Wow, you've been a ham as long as I've been alive. That's wonderful. Oh. And
I think I forgot to say on WB2KTV. Sorry.
And that was Steve, WB2KTV. Good to hear you're doing well, and good to hear your voice again here on the podcast and on the net last night. And last but not least, introduce myself. My name is Julian. My call is N1CA, November 1, Charlie Alpha. I live in Southern California, where it is finally, slowly but surely, starting to feel like spring, almost summer. It's been a crazy year, so glad to be feeling the warmth and looking forward to today's presentation as well. Along those lines, let's talk a little bit about what our presentation is going to be today. It's going to be all about CW, Morse code, CW as it's called. Some would call it the original digital mode because, it was sort of the first non-voice way of communicating with people out there. Much like a lot of our digital modes today are all packets and things. This was all done by sound, and it was the first digital mode. It's no longer required as far as getting a ham license in most places, but nevertheless, it's still a very popular mode. And a lot of times it is the mode to use in times of disaster, in times of noisy band conditions. CW can get through sometimes where voices can't. To some who love it, they say it's kind of like listening to music. I'm going to admit, I myself am not much of a CW person. I had to learn it when I was coming up in the ranks to get licensed and such, and I learned what I had to learn, but it never really caught on with me. But, you know, I always enjoyed listening to people who are passionate about something, even if it's not quite my thing. So I'm very much looking forward to this presentation today. It's going to be put on by members of the Long Island CW Club. And for that introduction, I'm going to kick it over to Chris, VE3RWJ, to do those introductions.
Thanks, Julian. And I would like to introduce our two guests, Howard, WB2UZE, and Mike, N1CC, from the Long Island CW Club. They reached out to me probably 7 or 8 months ago now. They were looking to make things much more accessible for anyone with a disability. Their instructor materials, all their documents, their website, their online practice tool that everyone uses when they're learning CW. So I really wanted to get them on the podcast to just let everyone in the blind hams community know what they've been up to, all the great work that's been going on, but also just to let them know about the club, how it started, how their methods might differ from other ways of teaching CW, what makes them, what makes them unique. I'm sure Howard and Michael have their own ideas of what they want to cover. So I guess we'll just pass it around. Howard, do you want to go first? You want to maybe introduce yourself and how did this all start? Where did the Long Island CW Club come from?
Well, good evening, everybody. And Chris, thank you for the introduction. And both Mike and myself very much appreciate being invited here to the Blind Hams podcast. So, Long Island CW Club, how did we get started and when? We got started back in 2018. And really the impetus behind the whole thing, Chris, was after Field Day in 2017, we really felt there weren't enough CW operators on Long Island. And most people know that you'll get 2 points for a Field Day CW contact versus a sideband of only 1. And we figured maybe it's a good idea to give back and see if we could create a more vibrant CW community in our area. So I went to my friend K2UPS Rich and asked him if he'd like to start the club. And he said yes. And I basically went to all the people that I knew in 3 of the major clubs on Long Island and kind of twisted their arm and said, hey, would you like to join? And they did, some under a little bit of friendly duress. And I thought, Chris, that after we had 52 members, we would be done. But at this particular point, the club is approaching 4,000 members in 50 states and in 50 countries, with 95 classes on Zoom every week, not only teaching CW, but we have presentations on all facets of radio and related technology every day. So one of the main tenets of our club is to help those that are not as fortunate as the majority of us are. And we always wanted to reach out to the community of the visually impaired and welcome them to the club. And through the hard work of a lot of people, including Mike N1CC, who will speak in a moment, we were able to achieve, through your guidance, Chris, accessibility of our website and all our important documents. And we're doing the best we can to make our community is inviting to those that have problems seeing as they can. Besides the visually impaired people, we have developed a patent pending vibrational device to deliver CW to the palm of people's hands with vibrations for people who have hearing problems. And we also have classes for autistic adults. So we care very much about everybody. And instead of just saying that, Chris, we did it because we mean it. So we're very pleased to be here tonight. Mike, would you like to add to that?
Hi, I'm Mike, N1CC, and it's a pleasure to be with the Blind Hams podcast. Thanks for the invitation, and Chris, thanks for the introduction. I'm a member of the team that developed the curriculum at LICW, and when Howard told us that he wanted to make sure that the club was welcoming to and accessible to people with disabilities, part of that naturally came to me, and we'll speak here in a little bit about our journey to make the club accessible.
Okay, that's great. I have to mention that I first heard of you guys during COVID, and I'm wondering if that's when you really started to grow at a very fast rate. Because all of a sudden, I heard about this group from Long Island who was teaching CW online to children, a lot of homeschooled kids who were having to stay home because of the pandemic, and suddenly I was hearing a lot about these classes for kids online. So that's where I first heard about LICW. You mentioned bringing me on board for some accessibility guidance. I have to say that really I'm making suggestions in discussions, and the rest of the team are doing all the work. I make some kind of suggestion about something that's not working or could work a different way, and it's done in under a week. I don't think I've ever worked with a bunch of people who were just that committed to just getting things done and dividing up the work. And I mean, it's really just been it's just impressive to watch. So I don't know how you want to do this. If you want to cover maybe some about the teaching methods, or I don't know, when you realized suddenly that you had a very large club on your hands, or I'm not sure where you want to go next.
All right. Well, I think I'd like to just set the pace here and talk about how we teach and why, and then some of the details of this to be followed up by Mike. Mike is actually the author of our current curriculum that was completely redone last year and gets updated as we go along. And there's a major revision coming out within the next week or so as we speak. So status quo is not the way we look at things, right, Mike? And everything is always tried to be improved. So when we first started the club, there was a common thought process, Chris, out there of how to teach CW. And it was called the Farnsworth method, after a man who was a very famous CW operator and also an inventor. And the theory was that it's best to send the CW at a very fast speed, but spread out slowly. The characters would be sent at 5 words a minute spacing, but the actual speed of the character would be at 20 words a minute or so. And the theory behind this was that you would be able to get to higher speeds quicker listening to the CW faster in the beginning. This was contrary to the way I learned, because I learned with a 78 record back in 1965. I still have that record. and we started off at 5 words a minute. Back then, we had to get our general within a year. We had to copy 13 words a minute or start from scratch again. Nobody wanted to do that. And we got up there. So that was kind of a foreign way. But in starting the club, I didn't really want to reinvent the wheel. And we decided to do this the way everybody else was doing it. But I never really was that comfortable with it. What we found in the first 3 years of teaching in this method, we created what we called a Farnsworth gap. Nobody on the air, which is the goal for anybody really who's learning CW, sends at what we call 20/5 or 20 word a minute character speed sent at 5 words a minute. Nobody sends 20/5. People send a true 12 words a minute. We'd call that 12/12, 15/12, something like that, but nothing like 20/5. And when people were getting on the air and hearing this, a lot of them couldn't make the adjustment, and they said, this is too difficult, and they quit. I always say that when you have to study something that's difficult and learning any oral language, CW being just like Spanish or learning French or anything like that, it takes a lot of work, and Netflix is calling, Chris. You know, when your family is having a good time and you're up there studying something that's very difficult, and then when it doesn't work out, you say, okay, that's it, I'm going to do something else. So that was the main reason that we decided to change the way we taught. And Mike came up with an entire way of re-engineering the system. And Mike, why don't you talk about how you did it and some of the more whys? That's basically the intro.
Well, as Howard said, after teaching 1,000 or more students, and plus our own life experiences in learning CW, we made certain observations. And one of them, as Howard said, was that this Farnsworth method, and really that just means that we're putting extra space between the characters. And we had gotten pretty good success with it, but we also had some reservations about it. We knew that it wasn't indicative of what students would hear when they got on the air, and our club is designed specifically to get students on the air. That's what our mantra is. That's what the entire objective of our curriculum is. Also, the fast character speed was difficult for students to recreate with their straight keys, and our club recommends that we begin learning CW by sending on a straight key. And so with that was some reservations. And then the second thing that we observed were that we had a traditional linear curriculum. It had a lesson that introduced characters, and then the next lesson introduced more characters, building on the first, and so on and so on. And when students joined, they wanted to get started right away. And students found that if they didn't start at the restart or at the beginning or near the beginning, that it was easy for them to become overwhelmed. And that's very quickly demotivational. And the last thing that we were curious about was the so-called Koch character sequence that started with the characters K, M, R, S, and U. And we just thought that was an odd character sequence because you can't even make words with something like that. And so armed with that curiosity and those observations, we got to work. We started doing a lot of reading of historical documents. And granted, a lot of what we read were not necessarily applicable to what we were looking for, but several of the documents were. And of particular interest was the 1936 Koch report by Ludwig Koch in Leipzig, Germany. And another fantastic document was Donald Taylor's 1943 doctoral thesis at Harvard. And by analyzing those documents, we came to our founders and said, we think we'd like to redo this curriculum. And they gave us the green light. The first thing that we attacked was the character sequence. And what we found was that Koch never used that character sequence of KMR, S, and U. That actually came from a gentleman named Lippmann in Germany back in 1919 in an article not published until 1928. And he was the first to theorize that you could predict how well a student would do in learning CW by how well they learned the first few characters. And so Otto Lippmann created what he considered to be an obscure character sequence of varying difficulty, and that was KMRSU. So here we were teaching a curriculum based on an obscure character sequence from an experiment. And by the way, Lippmann was correct. To this day, the most accurate predictor of future success in learning CW is how well you learn the first few characters. So armed with that, we decided to create our own character sequence. And here we took a page from Morse because when they designed the code, they wanted to find out what the most commonly used letters were in the English language. And to the most common used letters, they assigned the easiest Morse characters. But what we wanted to understand was how often characters were used in our QSO protocol. And so we added up all of those letters and we analyzed it. And to the most commonly used characters in the QSO protocol, we put those earlier into the sequence. And so our character sequence that we teach our students are based specifically on how often characters are used in the QSO protocol. And what that allows us to do is to very tightly integrate QSO words and phrases as we're teaching. So as you're learning CW, you're also learning how to communicate in CW. And the next thing we wanted to do was address this issue of class restarts. Students want to get started right away. They don't want to begin at the beginning. And so we created what we call our carousel, in which we put lessons in groups, and those groups go around and around in a carousel. Students jump on the carousel whenever they like, they come off the carousel whenever they like, and they progress to the next carousel whenever they feel that they're ready. The next major thing that we addressed was the issue of character speed. And as Howard said, we had been teaching at a character speed of about 20 words a minute with a lot of spacing, enhanced spacing called Farnsworth, bringing the effective speed down to about 5 words a minute. And here again, we turn to the historical documents. And Koch spent a lot of time dealing with this specific issue. About a third of his entire report deals with character speed. And what Koch found was that you had to send characters at least 10 words a minute for them to be heard as single acoustic sounds. And that really is what the Koch method is all about. The Koch method has nothing to do with a character sequence. Koch was all about learning characters as single acoustic sounds. And he narrowed in on 12 words a minute as optimum for initial learning of CW. And only after his students had learned all of the characters at 12 words a minute would he then ramp up the speed toward his ultimate target of 20 words a minute. And that seemed much more consistent with our mantra of preparing students to get on the air, because the vast majority of QSOs on the air that are not contest related are under 13 words a minute. So we redid our curriculum in a new format with a carousel, with a new character sequence based on our QSO protocol, and at a speed recommended by Ludwig Koch, 12 words a minute. We also needed a way to deliver this curriculum. And fortunately, one of our members Randy, KN4YRM, was experimenting with the Morse Code World library, and he was already developing his own trainer, and we partnered with him to develop what is now the LICW Morse practice page. It's a web-based cross-platform trainer that is absolutely fantastic with all of the integrated curriculum that we have in it. So that's our story of the LICW Beginners Carousel.
Great. And I must add in there that one of the very first accessibility things we tackled, or tasks we tackled, was getting that practice tool labeled properly for screen reader use. So all the buttons and edit fields and everything else on there now are now identified properly. Then it was tagging PDFs, and now we're on to fixing various things on the website. And even in the last week, we've had some things get fixed there. So a lot of good things going on the accessibility front. Do you guys have, with over 4,000 members, do you have any metrics yet on how many people, let's say, learn all their characters and have their first QSO, maybe out of the total number who start?
Mike, you want to take that?
Chris, we have metrics. We follow our students, and we believe that anybody can learn CW, but the learning of CW really varies greatly depending on one's aptitude, one's motivation, and the quality of practice. And going back to Taylor's doctoral thesis at Harvard, he found that roughly half of the people that try to learn CW never become proficient operators because they just don't have the aptitude for it. Again, we believe we can teach anybody. If they have the desire to learn, we will meet them halfway and get them there. But inevitably, a lot of people that are learning Morse code find that perhaps they don't have the time necessary to put in, or life gets in the way and things happen. And so we have people that start and for some reason they don't finish, or perhaps their goals aren't to get all the way up to high-speed telegraphy. They're just happy with learning the characters, perhaps just getting on the air. So yes, we have metrics. We follow it closely.
But people do, and you do make every opportunity to, as you say, meet the students halfway. Your carousel approach, where the curriculum just rotates, and people can hop on and hop off as it suits their schedule. To me, that was very unique. I don't know if did you see that somewhere, or did you guys come up with it?
No, that was the brainchild of Tom, AB5TN, one of the core members of our development team. And he said, "Hey, why don't we do it like this?" And we ran with it. It was just a brilliant idea.
You know, we're blessed in the club to have so many people offering untold hours of work and effort toward the club. I'm amazed many times at what's going on. Every Monday night, we have an instructors meeting that is about 40 people in there, and they're all highly motivated, suggesting ways to improve and to help and to also do the work. And the way we run this club, I'd like to discuss two facets: the way we run it and the way we've structured it to encourage people to stay with CW. Let me talk about that latter one first. Learning CW, as you can imagine, is not easy for everybody. Now, why did we go back and study documents from the turn of the century and World War II? Well, those were the years, especially during the 1940s, where they had to crank out thousands of operators every month during the war effort. And the government was searching desperately to find out better ways to teach. And those particular documents that we read, and some of them by Koch were translated from German to English for us, had a lot of secrets locked up that are still relevant till today. And we learned quite a bit, and that's why we use them and quote from them. But having said all of that, once you know how to teach, how do you get people to stay with it? Well, our aim really is to have fun with CW. And how do you do that? We built a club of fun around these particular rote learning classes. So every day we have different forums on different topics. Monday night we have radio and related technology. Last week we had a guy talking about Skywarn. The week before that there was a gentleman who was an expert on communications that Pan Am used to use all over the Pacific in the 1940s and 1950s. He spoke about that. We had one day where someone spoke about the laying of underseas communication cables in the Atlantic, which I didn't know went back into the 1800s. And we have forums like that on Monday. Saturday, we have a portable operations forum. We have a boat anchor forum. On Sunday, we have an antenna forum. Wednesday night, we have a CW makers class where they build kits together. And the teacher actually has a camera with a microscope that he can actually show the printed circuit boards while he's instructing. So all of these extracurricular type of activities are blended into the entire club. So people keep coming back and want to learn at the same time their CW. So it became a community, and a very valuable one, when everybody was locked down in the COVID area. And that's where we had this explosive growth. And even in the kids program, Chris, which you mentioned, we've taught over 500 kids CW, and a number of them have gotten their licenses. One of their kids, Jenna, who is blind, as you know, Chris, is teaching our head copy class. She's homegrown and 18. So besides this, what are the basic tenets of how do we get this cooperation and this ability that, you know, Mike was talking about of how this was all created? Mike had these ideas, but it all had to be done with scores of other instructors and contributors on how to do it. Just like you were mentioning on how we got quickly to do our accessibility. This doesn't happen overnight, and I don't know how to do it, Chris. Other people did it. We don't lead our club from the top down. There's no officers in the Long Island CW Club. There's no board. This is run from the bottom up. Everybody who has an idea is recognized and appreciated. If we don't agree with that person, we don't belittle that person, and we tell him why we might not agree, and maybe we'll use something from him in the future. Every idea that anybody makes is taken and considered and analyzed. And because everybody feels free to be able to contribute, we get this tremendous influx of input to help the club grow. And, you know, we want to include people that have various disabilities, and we give lifetime honoraries to people that are just not as fortunate as us. It could be someone who's blind. It could be someone who just had a heart attack. If I hear of anybody that's in any type of distress, I don't take money from them. They get in as an honorary, and why not? And all of this creates a very productive atmosphere, and that's what we believe in, and that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight, because we believe in this, and that's the way that the club is structured. So you structure a club that's welcoming to everybody, that has a good cooperation. Everybody's friendly. No one's allowed to criticize anybody else. Anybody says anything on Groups IO, which rarely happens, but if it does, it's shut down immediately and scolded. so everybody knows what we're all about. And this creates, hopefully, Chris, the atmosphere where people will want to learn CW, because it's hard. It's just like learning Spanish, German, or French, or any other language. How long would it take you to learn Spanish to be able to speak to somebody who came to your house to do some work, or someone in a restaurant, or anything like that? It would take years. The CW takes just as long. So that's a kind of long-winded comment, Chris, of what we're all about. I don't think I could tell you guys anything more.
Well, that's all excellent, and as just someone who's reading along on your groups.io forum, it's very evident that people feel comfortable sharing what they know, asking about what they don't know. The number of people who chime in and help is impressive. I assume people can approach instructors if they're having trouble and need some one-on-one support. It is a very, I guess I could say, egalitarian community. No one puts on airs or has secret knowledge or any of that. I'm not sure where to take it next. Mike, do you have anything you'd like to cover? Eventually, we're going to open this up for questions. So to see what
I would just not necessarily add, but just say what Howard said, just a little bit different. Because the students feel welcome, and because they quickly see how our instructors bend over backwards to give them whatever they need to help them succeed. When they do succeed, then they have a deep desire to give back. And as a result, we are blessed with incredibly talented and motivated volunteers. And we call that the secret sauce. That's what makes the club tick.
And it can be, just going on my own experience, it can be a little overwhelming how much is available. When I got that first welcome email and checked out the Dropbox and looked at the class schedule, and there is just so much going on and so much available. So I guess it's probably worth repeating here that if anyone joins after listening to this, they should attend those first orientation classes I believe they're on Mondays, right?
That's correct. Our intro classes are on Monday. That's where you learn to set up your key and oscillator so that it can work over Zoom. That's where you learn about the resources that the club has. And that's where you can learn specifics about how to use and access the Morse practice page. And then all of that goes straight into the first Beginner's Carousel 1 lesson.
And there are classes all the way up to, like you said, a head copy class that, Jenna can go 50 words a minute. She's not doing that to us yet, but so really it's all levels, but especially getting people started and getting them to have their first QSO. What was I going to say? I guess I should add that you've asked me to be the accessibility point person, at least for people, for members who are visually impaired. So if anyone has a problem, if they join the club and they have trouble navigating the website, using the practice tool, anything like that, screen reader issues, that kind of thing, all they need to do is look me up on CureZ and send me an email, or I'll give my address on here, smart, S-M-A-R-T, web tester. That's smartwebtester@gmail.com. And I'll filter things a bit. If you need screen reader help, I can help you with that. If it's something else that, needs to go to someone else in the club, I'll pass it on. If you have instructor feedback, maybe you don't want to mention it to them, but you want to mention it to me and have it get filtered a bit and passed along, that's great too. We want to hear from people about their experiences getting into the club and and trying things out. Do you guys have anything else you want to add before I'm sure people are chomping at the bit here to get questions in. So, anything else you'd like to add before I guess before I hand it back to Angelo or Joel?
Well, let me just say, Chris, how invaluable you have been to us and to our efforts. You know, when Howard said he wanted to make the club welcoming and accessible to people with disabilities, we had no idea where to even begin. And you really led this team and this effort and others to guide us, to educate us. And we could never have gotten this done without your help. And we truly appreciate it.
Well, the flip side of that is, it's only as good as the rest of the team, and you guys have been implementing things and fixing things very, very quickly. And that's if half the people I worked with were like that, it would really be a different world. Joel, do you want to take it and then maybe lead some questions?
Yeah, I have, just one question, just to how's, I know you have the website, and I'm going to be posting it in the show notes of the podcast and on YouTube. So what is basically the initial membership? How do you get started in the club? And with that answer, then we'll pass it back over to Julian as the host to direct anybody else's questions.
Okay, Joel. If somebody wanted to join the Long Island CW Club and they were sighted, we have a few steps. 1 year membership is $30. 2 years is $50. 3 years is $70. Nobody really ever takes that. And lifetime is $90. We like to encourage everybody to go that route because re-upping people every year is a tremendous accounting task when you have thousands of people. And, if you're a lifetime member, it's better for us that it's just a done deal, so to speak. If you want to become a member, you go to the website longislandcwclub.org, longislandcwclub.org. There is on the navigation bar a membership page. You click on that and then you click on apply for membership. You fill out a form which comes to me, and then I give you instructions what to do. If a person has a visual impairment and they let me know, I would immediately induct that person as a lifetime member, and there would be a process where we send an email confirming that, and we give you a membership number and details what to do next. It's a 10-point email, and then we'd send an invitation to join our group's IO and make sure that all of that would be taken care of. And if there was any problems, we would assign someone personally to help that person one-on-one. That's basically how it would work, Joel.
I just want to add that the membership form is a Google form, and I mention that because there's still a problem with JAWS and Google Forms. So if you use NVDA or VoiceOver or anything else other than JAWS, it will probably work fine. But JAWS, you'll have issues and filling out the Google form. So just something to be aware of. I wish JAWS and Google would get together and fix whatever their issue is, but it's kind of just a minor thing. So if you have NVDA or some other screen reader, you want to use that for the membership form.
Yeah, and what I was wanting to say was, wow, that you guys are more than generous to make an offer like that for the vision impaired group. So I hope you do have a donation page just for, even though you offer that, I think it would be more than appropriate for any of us to join to make a donation to, or even go for the full membership, just as a appreciation for what you guys are doing. So with that, I truly appreciate your time that you come tonight to share with us all this information about the Long Island CW Club. And with that, I want to pass it over to Julian so he can take any other further questions.
Well, if I can just say one thing before Julian goes, Joel, thank you. That's very kind of you, but I wouldn't accept it. Once I find out that someone has a vision problem, I just can't take any money from anybody. It's not something I do. There are other people that we give lifetime memberships to. It's not just the people who have vision problems or health problems. Clergy, lifetime membership, active military, get the same. Anybody who's a first responder, police officer, those people are also entitled to honorary lifetime memberships. It's the least that we can do for people that give back to society.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. And again, to echo Joe's words, that's very generous of you guys. But one thing I had intended to ask something along the same lines is there a method for anybody listening, regardless of ability, who maybe at this time maybe doesn't have the time or ability to get involved with your program, but at the same time believes strongly in what you're doing and the efforts and just wants to make a donation, just to make a donation to help out a good cause? Is there a way to do that?
Julian, it's so kind of you to offer that. We don't accept donations. The club is well financed the way it is. And we're doing okay. We have great support. So, we'd rather have somebody become a lifetime member, and even if they're not active, just to be a part of it that way rather than be a silent contributor. It's very kind of you to suggest that, but it's not something we do.
Okay.
This is like my parents are arguing over who's going to pay the bill for dinner.
I know. I think there's a commercial. I saw something like that where there was this argument, and finally the father-in-law says, "I am going to pay the check." Okay.
So just remember, it goes both ways. Another way you can pay it forward or help out is by giving the club feedback on how you, as a visually impaired person, are finding the classes or any other part of it, because they're trying to improve, across the board, procedures, documents, whatever. So just by letting them know what works for you, what doesn't work for you, if you're having difficulty with something, that helps too.
If I could say something there really quick, and of course, Chris, you're spot on, and that is the secret sauce. You don't have to support us monetarily, but become part of the process and let us know how your experiences are and how to make it better. Because to date, we have focused on digital accessibility. The Morse practice page is accessible. Our electronic documents are accessible. The website is becoming more and more accessible. But the next frontier for us is how we conduct the actual classes. What are our teaching methods? Can our sighted impaired students practice productively at home? And then the really what it's all about, our club is about getting people on the air. Can we teach a blind person CW and get them on the air? We don't know. We've never done that, but we'd like to.
Questions?
Awesome. Okay, so before we get to questions, early on, I think I saw Jessica with her hand raised, so we're going to go to her first and let her ask a question, if she's still there.
Yep.
Thank you, Julian. Yes, I am here.
So go ahead with your question.
I attempted to fill out the membership form, I don't know if it worked. I'm using JAWS and the Brave web browser.
Okay. I mentioned a little while ago that it's a Google form, and you should use NVDA or something other than JAWS to fill it out. You're gonna have issues with JAWS. You probably noticed it wouldn't find the edit fields, and JAWS probably said they were unavailable. So you need to use something other than JAWS. I know you have NVDA there, so that'll work.
Yeah, I mean, you would think
Narrator or anything.
Two big conglomerates like Google and Vispero could get together and solve this, but what do we know?
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for that, Jessica, and give NVDA a shot, and hopefully that'll work for you. Somebody else spoke up, I believe, was it Jerry, VE3QSO?
Yes, Julian, I have a couple of questions concerning the method.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, I guess, and what did you do with the Farnsworth spacing in your method? Did you keep it? Or when going to 12 words a minute, did you send CW with the normal spacing that you would get with 12 WPM? That's one question.
Okay, so enhanced spacing is an interesting tool. And what we find is that a little bit is okay, but too much is not. And we start there are 3 carousels, and we teach our carousel number 1 at a character speed of 12 words a minute, but an effective speed of 8, 12 over 8 to begin. Our second carousel bumps it up to 12 over 10. And then in our third carousel, which is all about getting on the air, it's 12 over 12.
Excellent. That sounds interesting. I noticed that you said, or someone said, that you encourage your students to use a straight key when learning. Do you still do that?
Yes. Let me begin by saying, in addition to being a club all about getting people on the air, we're also a club totally about flexibility. That's why we built the carousel, so students can start whenever they like. And that same flexibility applies to this recommendation of what key to learn with. We recommend beginning with a straight key, but if you want to use a cootie, a bug, or paddle, that's fine. No one will ever say anything. But there's a reason that we recommend beginning with a straight key, and that's because the straight key sends 1 for 1. The hand motion is identical to the character formation. And so as you're sending, you're reinforcing character element formation. So starting with a straight key, there's a method to it.
So a few hands raised here. I know Margaret had her hand up for a while. Margaret, would you like to go with a question?
Thank you very much. My call is KA1BZE, Bravo Zulu Echo. A couple of quick things. I'm currently teaching, and it just happened by chance. My local club expressed some interest in learning CW, so I just said, well, why not right now? And so I'm teaching them CW, but I took a little bit of different approach, and I want to get your thought on it. I took I started with the letters E, I, S, and H, and T, M, O, so that they would learn the difference between them, so that they would try to learn the sounds as a musical sound. And I did put it up to the spacing is 8 words per minute. And I try to keep as much spacing as I can, but I can't guarantee that I'm doing 5 words per minute. And my question is, what's your thought on that? And my other little question is there a chance in your lessons for students to learn to send to an instructor so that they can get comments about if their sending is good or is not, or maybe improving improving their sending. So I will unmute and listen.
Well, Margaret, thanks for the question. What you were referring to about the EISH 5 and the same thing with the DAS, commonly referred to as the DIT challenge. And Ludwig Koch speaks to that in his 1936 report because he tried it. And what he found was that it was very effective until you start introducing the other characters, and then it all falls apart. So it's not an optimum way of initial learning of Morse code. And as to feedback in sending, we have sending prep, good fist, we have BC sending, we have guided practice, and we have open practice. And all of those are designed to give our students the ability to practice and to get constructive feedback on their sending. And feedback on sending is absolutely critical, especially when you're initially learning and you're doing it on a straight key. We have our student practice against a standard always. So they hear a letter, they say a letter, and then they send a letter. So they're learning what things should sound like until they get an ear for it by practicing against a standard. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right. I see that Jessica has her hand raised again, but I want to see if there's anybody else who hasn't had a chance yet to comment or question before we take repeats. So anybody else would like to say or ask something? Please unmute and say your name or call or something so we can acknowledge you. Okay, hearing none, then go ahead, Jessica.
The audio now unmuted.
Thank you, Julian. I just wanted to acknowledge the Long Island CW Club again and say that my filling out the form with JAWS did go through. I confirmed it. And you guys are so sweet to offer a complimentary membership to those of us who are blind or visually impaired. That is huge. And I just subscribed to your guys' podcast. Congrats on your first episode. And I followed you guys on Twitter.
Awesome. I'm sure they appreciate that, and that helps a lot. Yeah, just get the word out there, join, subscribe, promote, all that great stuff, and ET phoning home at the moment. Yeah. Anybody else have any questions, comments? All right, hearing none, then I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to our guests from the Long Island CW Club. It was a pleasure hearing from what you're hearing from you. I very much enjoyed, and I'm sure all the listeners did as well, all your efforts, what you're doing. It's just totally impressive what you're doing, and the fact that you are caring so much about wanting the experience to be as accessible and inclusive to as many people as possible is an absolute plus. And as a blind person, I very much appreciate that. So thank you for coming, and thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you for having us, Julian. And, you know, I very much personally respect your community. You know, just to see how you know, there was one, we have one blind ham in the club, and his story, I spoke to him for a few hours. He married a sighted woman. He had 5 kids as a blind person and works as a professional social worker. I mean, 5 kids is enough for any sighted person to handle, and here he did it without seeing, and he was telling me how he used to solder and build homebrew transmitters being blind. And I just have such great respect for that, and it's amazing. And just Jenna, the way she operates and copies CW after a year at 50-something words a minute, and now as an 18-year-old is teaching adults and people 3 and 4 times her age. So I'm inspired by it. and I'm inspired to be here. And also, Jessica, I'll look forward to your application, and I'll either bring you in tonight or tomorrow. And welcome to the Long Island CW Club, and everybody else here is more than welcome too. And we hope that some of your listeners will join us. Mike, you want to wrap up?
Oh, I just want to echo what Howard said. Humbled to be here. Grateful that you had us. I can't wait to see you guys in class and help us travel this journey and help us make the club and our curriculum even better. So I look forward to meeting you all in class.
Awesome. And again, thank you for everything you do. Thank you for your kind words. My one response to what was just said is that, it's one thing not to have sight. The problem is when you don't have vision. I think when you have vision, you can accomplish all kinds of neat stuff. So that's a thing to remember. Thank you guys for coming. And I really hope that after doing this presentation that you will have many more blind hams joining your club.
Okay, thank you very much, Julian. And yes, we do hope that that is the outcome of this. It's been a pleasure. Thank you again, Chris, for introducing us to this group and for being a part of our club and helping out. And say good night to everybody.
And one more thing, if Mike is still there, I think it's cool to talk to somebody who's only a couple letters away from my call sign. You're N1CC and I'm N1CA.
Julian, I was just going to tell you what a nice call sign is.
It's awesome. That doesn't happen too often. All right, thanks, guys.
72.
73.
74. Why not?
Good night, everybody.
Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and visit www.blindhams.com.